Don't have any arrears, no late payers, no idiots. I don't do that because I'm beating people with a stick. I do it because I'm offering something which people want to pay for and they want to stay.
But I think there's really good context. The due diligence side, the realities of investing in, it's not just what, they make it sound really easy on social media, but it's definitely not. You and I know that very well.
And I get quite a lot of abuse from the landlords about it. And I'm just like, raise your game, mate. You're the ones that are pulling the reputation into the gutter. And that's why we have, the legislation we have.
People, asking, can I get a 4-bed, all-en-suite commercial value, and I've had 4-bed HMOs, and I know for a fact that you wouldn't make any money from a commercial value on a 4-bed.
And the first thing I saw when I went to view this property was a load of arrest warrants. She was like, oh yeah, and this house comes with the existing tenants and you can just take it on as an investor. And I was like, no.
Before we kick this episode off, I want to let you know about our next show that will be taking place in Manchester on the 4th of September at Manchester City Stadium, the Etihad. Doors to the show will open at 10 a.m. They'll shut at 3 p.m. We have 12 keynote speakers, multiple exhibitors, and lots of opportunity for networking. Details for the show are in the description. Tickets are free. We hope to see you there. Welcome to another episode of the Property Developer Show, the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Caroline Pattinson, who has been an investor for 28 years. She seriously breaks the landlord mold, that the usual, I suppose, hate that landlords get. She certainly breaks out that mold. She's an award winner, HMO Awards, for the best tenant or best landlord voted by your tenants, which is an incredible achievement, of course, as well as another HMO Awards. What was that one? What was the other one?
There was, hi Scott, thanks for having me
on.
No
problem. Straight
today.
Into it.
Yeah, straight into it. Lots to discuss.
Yes, absolutely.
So I was absolutely thrilled to bits to get the best professional HMOs, which was at the HMO Awards last year. Mm-hmm. So that was a big one for me. I was really happy. But the one I was really most happy about at the HMO Awards was, because there was so much competition as well, was the as voted by for your tenants. Because obviously, we landlords and property providers can say, that we think we're doing a good job. But I've got, 80 odd 5-star reviews on my Chester Home Share pages. And, I think that was, and the tenants were sent questionnaires directly by the judges. I didn't even know what was in them. I didn't see them. And they went directly on what the tenants had to say, and they asked. I know that they asked some really difficult questions, so that was a big award for me. And then the Blue Bricks one, that was best co-living accommodation in the UK provider as well last week. So a week before last. So yeah,
amazing. Well,
happy with that.
Hopefully, in this episode, we can find out what it takes to be an award-winning landlord and investor. So starting from the beginning, then 28 years ago, what was the stepping stone into property?
So I'd done stuff with my own houses, because like most of us, couldn't afford to buy my own house or not the one I wanted. And so bought something that needed doing up. I had no clue how to do it. But one of the reasons I bought my very first house as a first-time buyer when I was 21, so I was really young. But I've been working since 16, so I started working at NatWest Bank straight from school at 16, and then did qualifications along the way, when I was working full-time as well. So the very first house I bought was, I noticed it had a crappy strip of land to the side of it that was all overgrown and just full of crap and stuff like that. And I looked at that and thought, there's no garden with this. It's an end terrace house. And I can't afford to do it right now. But if I can make that into a garden and put a wall around it, and then knock down an old bit, there was a massive corrugated iron, horrible shed at the back. I thought, if I can knock that down, that will give some parking, and I can add value to the house as and when I saved up for it, to add a garden and put a wall around it. And I actually drove past that old house last week when I was going somewhere else, and it's still going strong. And I did that. So it's just saved up, do a bit, save up a bit more, do a bit. But that meant that when I sold that house, the fact it had gone up in value anyway, and the fact I'd added value very cheaply, really, to it, gave me enough profit to buy my next house, which was an old farmhouse at auction. I didn't even go in some of the rooms because it was so disgusting. Bought that as an auction property. And I remember my mum was babysitting my little lad at the time, and I got home and burst into tears, and she went, "Oh, you didn't get the house then? You didn't get it?" And I said, no, I did get it. And I'm absolutely terrified because I'm never going to afford to be able to pay it or go out ever again. And that was kind of like my, accidental entrance into property developing. And that was just property developing before landlording, if you like. But at the same time, I was working as a mortgage advisor. By this time, I'd qualified as a mortgage advisor and a financial advisor and a property lender in the bank. And I was I was going out on site and seeing stuff because I got really bored very quickly with doing first time buyers and, remortgages and stuff like that. So I did some extra qualifications, and it was in the days when it wasn't really computer says no, computer says yes. So I actually got to go out on site and watch property developers and people buying. It was when buy-to-let really started to take off, and sort of Joe Public was able to do it. And so I was really fortunate enough to be able to get all the business cases in from people at which I'd been trained from a NatWest Bank lending point of view to assess, and then write the business case as to whether we should lend the money or not, which involved me going out on site, speaking a lot to the surveyors and the solicitors. And then one day I just thought, hang on a minute, I'm sat here not getting paid very well. Getting, really well qualified, but I'm not getting paid very well. And I've, had people coming back, let's say that was yourself, like 6 months later, Scott comes back and says, oh, Caroline, I'm making all this money on my first one, it's going really well. Can you do me the finance for the second one? And I thought, I wonder if I could do that. I wonder if I could do it. And I thought, well, if he can, I can. Yeah. So I was only like really young at the time. I was only like 22, 23. But because I started working in a bank at 16, I already had quite a few years of experience under my belt, and I was ambitious. And I went out on my lunch hour one day and put a deposit down on a terraced house in Chester, which I've still got to this day. Paid 50 grand for it, and it's just been valued at like 400 and odd. So
wow.
Yeah, but I started HMOing that from day one.
Okay. Before that was a thing, did you kind of decide, or you saw it, or you kind of like, I can maximise what I've got?
It wasn't that sophisticated.
No.
I was scared to death because I thought I can't afford it.
Yeah.
B, you were not supposed to have a side hustle in the bank or a business. It was really frowned upon. So I had to do it in secret.
Yeah.
And C, I was too scared to go to a letting agent and letting it to a family because I was a kid, I was like, I can't do that. And also I had loads of mates who were at that stage of life, 22, 23, where they don't want to be living at home with the parents, but they can't afford their own place. And there was very limited accommodation available, and what there was disgusting. So I just rented it to my mates by the room. It wasn't ever an official kind of thing. And then I used to go and crash there when we'd all been on a night out in town.
Nice, handy.
Yeah, it was quite handy.
Yeah, a good
and that's
investment.
how I got started. And then more and more people came to me, of course, because word of mouth, and said, because I just made it. It's just still my ethos today. I'm more sophisticated about it now, but I didn't want my friends to be living in a scummy place. So although it still had wood chip on the wall and beige and everything, I just put stuff in there that I wanted, that I thought was nice, and that my friends thought were nice. And there was no fire regs or anything back then either to comply with, or licensing fees or anything like that. So had the old pine doors, and the place looked nice, and just put a decent kitchen and bathroom in it. And then, of course, word spread, and then more and more people were coming to me going, close to Chester city centre as well, so you can commute and stagger home from a night out and all of that. And it was just better than anything else that was on the market. Again, it wasn't that I did that intentionally. To me, that's just common sense. I still to this day, I believe I'm successful and I literally have 100% occupancy and 0 voids and 0 arrears, none. No, somebody moves out in the morning, place is clean. Somebody moves in at night, I run it. I don't have any arrears, no late payers, no idiots, no voids, 100% occupancy and 100% rent paid on the day. That's it. And I don't do that because I'm beating people with a stick. I do it because I'm offering something which people want to pay for, and they want to stay and they want to pay. So that's a philosophy that I've developed and still holds true.
What is that offering then specifically? What's the secret to having no rent arrears, 100% back-to-back tenancies? What is it that you're sort of doing to get that outcome?
Just treat people as you want to be treated yourself. So we all have different standards. And if I post into some of the landlord groups, for example, I get no end of grief. And I'm going to give you an example from, which obviously messaged you about this morning. Last night, I was in Leeds. moving my daughter out of her student accommodation into her second year student house. And I'm just appalled. So she said this is a brilliant house compared to the others I've seen. It's an 8-person house, and it's supposedly been done up a year ago. The cost of the house is over £68,000. Obviously, the landlord has no council tax to pay on that because it's students, so they're exempt. So there's only the utilities and a 68.5 grand rent roll. I've got houses myself that have a 68 grand rent roll, and those housemates, I call them my customers. I don't like to use the terminology tenants and landlords. I think it's divisive. I think it's inflammatory. The media obviously just pour flames on that at any chance they can. So I prefer to call myself a property provider, which is what I am, or a home provider. And my tenants are my customers. And I speak at a lot of events about this, about raising standards. And, I'm very active, obviously, in the landlord groups, property groups, write for a magazine and things like this. So I'm very vocal about this. This is my ethos. And I get quite a lot of abuse from the landlords about it. And I'm just like, raise your game, mate. You're the ones that are pulling the reputation into the gutter. And that's why we have, the legislation we have. And when I went to this house yesterday, I could see why. So, for example, I'm just going to use it as a live example if you're asking me what's the difference between what I do. Because sometimes I feel like a fraud for getting all these awards and things like this, because I just think, well, I'm not doing anything that special. I'm not doing what, in my mind, you shouldn't do for somebody, right? But I have to say, having been there till late last night, this will be a very typical experience, I think, for a tenant, I guess, is we arrive at the house, the place is a dump. I wasn't going to swear on here, but my daughter, who's coming up 20 years old, she just said, Mum, this. She could see my face and she wanted me to say, oh, this is lovely. I couldn't say it. And she went, don't start criticising. And I said, This house is a 4-storey house. There's no fire panel in there. So it's straight away, it's illegal. There are no self-closers on the doors, which I'm not even convinced are fire doors, illegal. There's no smoke alarms in the room. So straight away, that should have a grade A LD2 fire panel system in it for a 4-storey house. There's no building regs being met. There's bedroom doors that open down flights of steps into the basement, which literally could kill somebody. I am fuming. I'm trying to be enthusiastic as a mum, and I'm just literally going, no. The place is disgusting. The previous students have moved out what looked like the day before. It's not cleaned. And I just think, where's your pride? And then this morning she's messaged me saying, there's no kettle or microwave. There's very little storage in her room. Now she said that, what's in her room is like far better than the other student accommodation available. But there's nowhere to store anything. And she's very stoic, my daughter. I brought her up to be very independent. But she was nearly in tears. She's like, there's literally nowhere to put my stuff. There's nowhere in the bathroom. There's no toilet holder in the bathroom. There's no hooks on the backs of the doors. There's no... The wall, there's been stains on the wall which have just been painted in a different colour because they couldn't be bothered to paint the rest of the room, even though it was white anyway. The blind doesn't close properly. There's all fluff and disgusting. There's sanitary pads on the floor when she moved the bed, and I just think you're getting 68 grand on it. But even if you're only getting 18, the ethos to me is still the same. I make sure that when somebody moves into one of my houses that it's as easy as possible. I want them to stand in that room and not burst into tears nearly like my daughter was. If she's listening to this, she's like, I was not. But, I want someone to move into my room going, oh, God, I love it here. It's great. I want them to be messaging their friends on Instagram going, look at my place. It's amazing. So I not only are all my properties interior designed, I put every single thing in there that I can think of to make their life easier. And I also think it's important to have a gender mix, ideally a 50-50 male-female in the house. It's just the demographic that tends to work the best in my experience. And on the whole, you're not supposed to stereotype nowadays, but on the whole, lads want different things to girls. They want space for big telly. They just do, and they get gaming stuff on the whole.
Yeah.
Girls, on the whole, they want space to put they want space to put all the toiletries and the shoes. They want a makeup mirror. They want a full length mirror in the room. Like, there's no mirror in my daughter's room, and you could go, oh, it's only a mirror, go and get one. But I provide all of this stuff. I'm paying the same. I'm paying £750 a month for my daughter's uni accommodation, which has no kettle, no microwave. The washing machine is in the lounge. There's a sofa with a load of rips in it, which isn't fire compliant and looks minging. The place is rank filthy, and they're not even supplying a kettle and a microwave. And when I told her to go back to the landlord and ask, and he went, oh yeah, they're movable items, so we don't provide that. And I just think it's frankly taking the piss, and so all of those things I provide, I don't just provide them, they're cleaned every week. They are maintained. If a tenant messages me, a customer messages me, as they too did last week, and said, my mattress is really uncomfortable, can you get me a new one? Literally, there's one there by Friday. I've got suppliers, I've got trade accounts with everything. I've got a bed supplier. I text him, I go, like, Dave, can you take two mattresses away from this house and that one and take them a new one? And they're not rubbish mattresses, they're hotel grade mattresses. And then I send them a mattress cover because I want them to look after it. And those things, to me, are what someone says, oh, what's the secret? But then and I'll go, well, it's this, just treat people right. I'm making a lot of money, and therefore I spend a lot of money on keeping people happy. And in return, then they are more, they want to stay. They know they can't get anywhere else that's better.
Yeah.
They know, they appreciate things. And because I'm treating them well, again, people don't not pay their rent. I mean, obviously, if somebody's lost their job or there's a genuine situation, we have a conversation about that, but it's absolutely the exception, because people they want to pay their rent on time, and they want to keep the place nice, because that's what I set out to them at the beginning. And because they love it and they make friends in the house, and I'm very, very particular about picking housemates who are the same age and something. And, and we can talk a lot about tenant experience. Customer experience is critically important. I feel that we're more in an entertainment industry, a hospitality industry, really. I have Airbnbs as well, and I've done Airbnbs as well for 20 years in like Spain and UK, and I've got various Airbnbs as well. And it's very similar. You have to look at your guest experience and your customer experience. And generally, if you do that and you get 4 or 5 stars on like an Airbnb, I'm also an Airbnb superhost as well, which I've had repeatedly. So I kind of think, okay, I must be doing something right. And then you can charge top money, and people will tend to look after the place. Do
you think that sort of, because obviously Chester's a lovely place, if anyone that hasn't been to Chester, they ought to. Do you think that model works in, if I was to go to, I don't know, Burnley, or, sort of, I suppose, lower end of kind of what people can afford? Do you still think that model kind of works with those types of HMOs?
Oh, Scott, we'll have to ask me again in a year, because I've just taken a massive punt. So I've just literally in the process of making a over £600,000 gamble.
Wow, nice.
On that exact point right now.
Interesting. I'll have to have you back in 12 months then.
Yeah, you can ask me in 12 months. I'll either have made a massive screw up, in which case that's going to hurt me a lot, because, probably well over £600,000 that I'm spending right now of my own money, on diversifying into an area which is much more, doesn't have the affluence that Chester has. It's in North Wales, just over the border, so it's only half an hour down the road, but it's a completely different demographic. If it's an ex-nunnery, it used to be a nunnery, and then after the nuns left in the early 90s, it was turned into a working man's HMO. So it's had nothing spent on it as far as I can see. It's very typical HMO. The bathrooms were disgusting. They were all sited. So here's the thing, because we're obviously on a property developers thing, so I can talk to you. I've been doing property development, I'll say, for a really long time. And one of the other reasons that I believe I'm successful at what I do, but equally I then again spend far more money than most people would. So, not everybody's maybe in a position to do that, or very often there's a mindset thing as well, which I'm trying to change with property investors. which is you can spend more, but then you can make more, and the aggravation factor. We can't get tenants out. The fact of the matter is, the tenants hold all the cards. So the better your quality tenant, the less risk for the business. And I'm de-risking my business all the time. And also, I don't want aggravation. I've got a team of people, and I want them to be able to deal with nice customers. Frankly, I've been there with all the people who threaten you and say they know where you live, and I've run that business myself as a single woman for years, like 20 years. I've been threatened with knives. I've taken knives off tenants who are fighting in kitchens. I've broken up fights. I've dealt with people who won't leave. Big men. I've done all of that, and I don't want to do it anymore. I'm not doing it anymore. So in taking houses posh, you might say. Frankly, this might not be politically correct, but my evidence and my long experience, I've had over 1,000 tenants and customers through, well over, and God knows how many guests. And, the behaviour of people does change on your different demographics. So I'm really, for someone to rent with me, I'd have to be happy to invite them round to my own house for dinner.
Okay, I like that outlook.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, because that would be weird, but that's kind of my thing. So picking the tenants is something that it's the only thing I still do myself. And the property development, I can tell you right now, every centimetre that those joiners should be hanging the doors and which way round they're hanging them right now, like on the site, hoping that they're there. I'm going to go after this and check. So going back to your question, so I've bought an ex-nunnery, then it was a working man's HMO after that, very cheap, £300 a month or something. I'll be charging $750.
Wow, okay.
And the local builders that came around when I was trying to find the builders for it, they just looked at me up and down and they just said, "What on earth are you doing this for?" I showed them the pictures off my Chest Home Share Instagram, whatever, which I'm not brilliant on social media because I'm always full, so I don't really need to advertise very much. I've had 6 referrals come in this morning from existing people that want in this house, and it's still a building site, so I don't tend to advertise that much, and my marketing probably could be better, but I just don't really need to, which is a nice position to be in. And the builders that came round, I knew what they were thinking, and they looked me up and down, and they thought, "Oh, here's some bloody woman some posh woman from Cheshire, and she thinks that what she's got there is going to work here in an ex-mining town." It's an ex-mining town, and when the steel works shut down, the area went really, really downhill, as with many communities in the UK. When so it was very much a working man's town. Beautiful Victorian buildings that have become very neglected and therefore very cheap, which is why I've gone there. And the average rent in the area for a room, and these rooms, the standard of accommodation is appalling in my opinion, is about 400 and something.
Right, okay. So
I've just rented one, and there's a building site, it's not even done for 800.
Amazing.
Because I focus on, I've still got 10 more to go yet. So again, I'll tell you, but I basically really believe in myself about build it and they will come. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly who my demographic is, and I stick with it. I'm also doing a combination of some Airbnb, so it's like short-term lets for
in the same building.
Yeah, which is an experiment for me. So that's interesting. I'm doing garden studios in the building because it's a massive, big 3,500 square foot Victorian property. Beautiful. Well, it wasn't beautiful, but it is in the process of being made beautiful. And it's got wraparound gardens all the way round. So I've put French doors into some of the ground rooms, the big ones, so that you can have your own private patio area. And you can have your own entrance. So it's still an HMO. But I've got a planning permission for 13 people for that house. I probably won't put 13 in, but I've got planning permission for 13. And it means that I can offer, there's a big demand for flexible accommodation. So I don't want people moving in and out every 5 minutes, but I really see labour as a risk. We're probably going to have a Labour government. The Rent Reform Act before was a risk for me, and it's a risk for any landlord, because although I treat people really, really well, the legislation is aimed at people who don't treat their tenants well, and I understand why that's required for many landlords in this country. But for me, it's about de-risking my business, because I cannot have people in who, if necessary, if really, really necessary, antisocial behaviour or something like that, I can't risk having those people in. And the first thing I saw when I went to view this property was a load of arrest warrants on the table. You'd think the estate agent would have moved them, wouldn't you?
Wow, jeez.
There was about 4 different arrest warrants. So I was like, And she was like, oh yeah, and this house comes with the existing tenants and you can just take it on as an investor. And I was like, no, vacant possession. And that's the kind of thing which, if you're new in the industry, you can get really caught out with that stuff.
Absolutely.
So so I basically have a lot of connections with the big local employers and the graduate schemes and things like that. So I'm basically, even though everybody in the local area, all the professionals, the estate agent and the builders and all of this, they literally either laughed at me or I could see they were thinking, she's just bonkers. she wants to spend £250,000 on the house, more.
Yeah.
That is more than the houses on the rest of that street are worth. It's a huge risk for me, and they think I'm mad. However, I'll tell you in a year.
Yeah, looking forward.
Because the rent roll I'm expecting on this property is over 85,000 a year.
Wow.
And so maybe 90.
Nice.
That's the rent roll I'm expecting, and I paid 277,000 for it.
So what kind of, I guess, what due diligence went into making that? I know there's a slight element of risk, but I can't imagine there being too much of a risk in your own mind, because obviously you wouldn't have done it.
Well, there is.
What kind of went into that due diligence piece then to kind of think, right, if I can replicate the model that I'm doing in Chester, what did you kind of just go, that looks like a nice area, let's go and try it there? Or has there been sort of, I guess, a bit of, due diligence, fact checking within that kind of area then?
Yeah, you've got to do your due diligence. But, these property courses and everything, I'm highly sceptical about property courses. I really am. I've just learned, by making those mistakes. And one of your questions was, what's your biggest challenge? I can come back to that. I've made loads of mistakes. And some of those mistakes have cost me a lot of money. And some of the things are, they just turn out really profitable anyway in time. But I think it's really difficult to give somebody the giving the advice of do your due diligence is all very well, but what actually is that due diligence? So I did loads of due diligence, and if you research this area that I've just made this huge investment into, it's either going to cause me a massive financial pain because I've completely misjudged it and overshot, the amount I'm spending on it. Even the builder, I know, is looking at me with raised eyebrows thinking, why is she doing this? I've put gold sinks in. This is a working man's area.
Yeah, fair enough.
He thinks I'm nuts. He hasn't said so, but I can see it in his eyes. But that's not my tenant demographic.
Yeah.
And the standard of accommodation across the whole of the North Wales area that I'm looking at is shocking, in my opinion. So that demographic is already quite well catered for, the cheap end of the market. But if you want something better, so I've got interns and graduates coming to work at the big local employers, and they really struggle with getting quality recruits because there's nowhere decent for them to live. And they don't want to, they don't want to live in the accommodation. Some do. If they're on an apprenticeship, they're not going to be able to afford what I'm charging, but that's not my demographic. My demographic is the graduates, the interns, the established professionals, the people who are coming for 12 months to work. They want somewhere nice to live. They don't want to take an unfurnished flat because that's just a hassle and it's a cost and they're not very nice anyway. And all the hassle of sorting out the bills. I make everything really easy. Everything's on a plate. If the light bulb goes, my maintenance team go out and do it. I've got a fantastic guy called Swiss and he does a lot of my maintenance. I've got other guys that work for me full time and women. And if they want something, it's done. And so that ease, especially in that generation of 20s, they do want stuff on a plate.
Yeah.
And so I give it to them. They have to pay for it, but I have found that is an uncatered area. So in most of the, your Manchesters and whatever, there's lots of us now doing better quality stuff and catering for that demographic. So one of the reasons I've chosen to take a punt and move into what I see as an untapped area, I say it'll either be a catastrophic mistake or it'll be massively profitable. So obviously I'm going for plan A, massively profitable, but
we'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Good stuff. Let me just pause this episode for a moment just to quickly introduce you to our episode sponsor, the Property Finance Collective. Transforming visions into reality requires not just a great idea, but the right financial support and the best possible team around you. Specialising in development finance, bridging finance, and commercial mortgages, the Property Finance Collective are there to help you navigate complex markets to secure the funding you need, as well as being part of your team that you can rely on. With a flair for creative deal structuring, they tailor solutions that fit precisely with your project demands, ensuring speed, efficiency, and flexibility. They want to help you make the impossible possible. Now let's get back to the episode. So the nunnery, how did you go about sourcing that property?
Rightmove.
Okay.
Again,
just through an estate agent. Was it commercially listed, or was
no,
it?
it was just listed on the residential of Rightmove. So,
Nice.
Again, I don't go with a lot of the stuff which is out there on the property groups at the moment and what's trained, direct to vendor and all of that. I do have people coming to me through word of mouth about, can you buy this, neighbours particularly, or local people that come from all over and say, I've got this house, the sale's fallen through, can't sell it, whatever it is, can you buy it? That happens a lot, but I never go looking for it. I can't be bothered. I haven't got time. I'm really, really busy person, really busy. I'm running a business. I've got three kids, got a massive refurb on the go, other stuff lined up. And so I've always used Rightmove. I have got exceptions to that where I have bought some stuff direct to vendor, but I saw it on Rightmove first. I did a fantastic purchase lease option deal, where I was able to buy my son a house on a purchase lease option, but that's a separate thing. That was a belting deal. I was really, really happy with that. But coming back to, it was on Rightmove. It was ridiculously cheap it's not cheap for the area, but for me as an investor, I know what I hope, what I believe. Again, I think the rent roll on this house, again, I've priced it a minimum of 85,000 a year, on an investment of 600 and something. I'm happy with that. I don't tend to go with any of the typical things which are put out there on property courses and that people talk about. I don't have a spreadsheet that has return on investment things in all of that, because I see people doing return on investment and like, yay, I've got a return on investment of 16%. And I'm like, yeah, but you're making £200 a month, mate. What is the point?
Yeah.
I don't touch anything that would make, you have to be careful, don't you, about what you say like publicly, because I don't want newspapers on me. But I'm a businesswoman. I don't touch anything which is not going to make me a substantial profit, which is worth my time, not just on the initial investment, but I've already talked about the standards that I have going forward. That costs, my outgoings are considerably higher than this landlord who I'm going to track down later on today from Leeds and just ask him what the hell he's playing at in a much more nice way than that. So I know that I need to be making a substantial amount of profit on the property, to make it worth my while, else I'm not going to buy it. And I own all my own properties, by the way, as well. And I manage, all my team manage them. So I'm able to keep the standards up. Going back to your original question, if it becomes difficult the bigger you get.
Of course.
But I own and manage all my own stuff. So that means I'm able to be a lot more discerning on where I spend the money and where I invest and so on. So when I was looking at this property, I'm thinking, okay, it doesn't really matter to me where I get it from, as long as I know I can make those figures work, which again, I've already talked about with that. But I also know that the profit margin needs to be really quite substantial, because things change and inflation obviously is a factor for all of us. Interest rates were going up massively at that time. I needed to get planning permission on it that was different to what it had. In fact, there was no planning. So it was used as a 10-bed HMO at the time, but there was only 4 people living in it because it wasn't licensed, and it should have been. So I think they were trying to fly under the radar with that. I had to sort all that out. But my costs are obviously higher as well because of the maintenance and the care and attention, because they have cleaners as standard, gardens as standard, all of those things. But the due diligence in the area was basically around competition, demand. The demand is difficult, and so this is an area where a lot of property developers go really wrong as well, I think, is that they completely overestimate, probably fed by courses from what I can see, on GDV afterwards. And I think I look at all these posts on Facebook and people who've done beautiful looking HMOs, and you think, what is behind that plasterboard? Seriously, what is behind that plasterboard? What the finish is great, but it will only take you so far. If the drains are knackered, you're going to have costs. I've just spent £15,000 on having new drains in this property because I know that the amount of showers I'm putting in, a lot of 9 bathrooms this week and stuff. And if those drains are not right to cope with the capacity in the house, all I'm going to do is have problems after problems. So I have learned from bitter experience that it's not a good idea. So I spent a lot on drains and stuff like that. But when I was looking in the area, I just thought, well, there will be a cap on the refinance for this property. And again, I see on the property groups and it drives me nuts. But at the same time, it's not for me to pull anybody else down, even though I think those reality checks come at a high, heavy cost when they get downvalued. Because you see people and they go, typically I've just seen one not long ago. Oh yeah, I've bought a terraced house in Bolton for 165 and I've spent 100 on it and the GDV is going to be like 500,000. And you just think it's not because there's a bricks and mortar cap and people desperately going, which lenders can they use to get commercial valuations? It doesn't work like that. It works on, and I could say this, I have valuers phoning me often saying, can you tell me what you're getting? Because they need comparable they need to provide at least 3 market comparable benchmarks for the area. And that's really difficult to get. So I get valuers often ringing me to benchmark, to provide evidence on their valuations. And so I think there's a lot of people who are newbie out there who are going to get really badly caught out. And so I know on this property that I'm doing now, it will not come out at some huge GDV afterwards, even if the rent roll is stratospheric, because of the bricks and mortar valuation and the lack of data comparables in that area. So these are the kind of risk factors which, when you're asking me about due diligence, I know that if it's valued at what I've spent on it, that would be probably a good result, but it certainly isn't going to be like 10 times rent roll or any of these crazy things I think I see people speculating on. But because I know that, and I'm doing it for cash flow, and I don't need to mortgage it up to the hilt afterwards, I can go with that level of risk. And it also might be that I don't get these rents, It maybe that's the case, and therefore I've done all of my figures based on worst case scenario as well.
Sure. I think there's definitely that kind of ethos around the commercial valuation space in the HMOs.
It's crazy, yeah.
People, asking, can I get 4-bed all en suite commercial val, and I've had 4-bed HMOs, and I know for a fact that you wouldn't make any money from a commercial val on a 4-bed, particularly if the rates are where they are at the moment. So I think people just love that leverage piece, and I've got all my money out to do it again, which is great, because it allows you to scale. But also, if you're not factoring the risk factor with that, and you've got a 5-bed HMO that's full and it's making you 200 quid a month, then you've got to question
what is the point. I also think as well, you're having to pay, on the whole, higher interest rates from those kind of lenders. So when I see people making posts, again, it's not for me to pull people down. I get people messaging me all the time about, can you advise me on this and can you advise me on that? And, sometimes, when I can, I'll try and help, but often people don't want to hear that reality, because they're like, I've got this and blah, 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 and it'd be worth afterwards. I went to very seriously doubt that. And also, I was speaking at the HMO, there was a national conference from HMOs in October, and I was one of the speakers there and on the panel and stuff afterwards. And it was interesting because we had the head of the PRS there, and we had, there was a lot of really good quality people, and I was on the panel, and there was 3 surveyors from Paragon Lender there as well. So we also had some councils there. So I was risking being shot by being the landlord on stage and talking about why I pulled out of the family market because of the risks to landlord, which made for some interesting panel conversations with the councils. But that's why I did it. And the surveyors, I said, right, let me just settle something which I know to be true, but you're here, there's 3 of you. Bricks and mortar valuations versus commercial valuations talk to me about where you are. And they went, well, we don't. We look at a balance between, if you've got a terraced house on a street and all the other houses in that street worth 200, you can spend all you like on your HMO and it might be beautiful, it might be making massive profit, but there's a bricks and mortar because you can buy the house next door for 200 and do the same thing. So why are most investors going to then pay 500 for yours? They're just not. So that, that's a message I'd actually like to get out there more. So I was like, okay, good. I thought that was the case. I know that's the case, but it was interesting to get it firsthand as well.
Definitely. Now, good stuff. So to, I guess, quickly round the episode off, what advice would you give to someone that's looking to get into HMO investing? What's your best bit of advice? Apart from don't do it.
I get that. No, not don't do it. I've had someone literally yesterday, can I meet you for a coffee and can you help me do it? It's not a 2-minute conversation. I've built up my experience and I've got, a very successful business, but it takes a lot of hard work and money and focus and staff and everything to maintain those standards. So naivety. Again, I'm not keen on courses, but equally I understand they need to learn, but I'm not keen on people paying 5, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds for masterminds and stuff. Very open to be challenged on that. I think doing the numbers is the most critical thing. Obviously I'm sure you do as well. I get sent stuff from deal sources and stuff all the time and it's absolute rubbish. So I was like, right, where's the running costs? Oh, well, there won't be any because it'll be brand new. And like the refurb costs, right, well, where's the insulation? Labour probably have already said that at the conference, at the National Landlords Conference, that they're going to put EPCC ratings in as a requirement. So where's your cost for that? Because I've just done that and it's thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds worth of costs that tenants don't see. All they see is the pretty stuff. So I think being realistic on the cost is a big part of it. But then how do you find that out if people aren't willing to speak the truth sometimes, or they don't even know? Competition in the area, obviously Article 4. Don't rely on your solicitors or your estate agents to pick up any of these things. I've just had to get a covenant off a property, which I picked up. I bought a house in an Article 4 area on purpose because it had been an ex-student house and I had grandfather rights on it. So I bought that on purpose in an Article 4 area because to me that house was worth a lot more than the estate agent was advertising it at. Neither the estate agent nor the solicitor picked up it was Article 4. And when I knew it was, so I'd bought it on purpose. But if anybody new who was relying on an estate agent or a solicitor to tell them and it's Article 4 and explain what those risks are, that there's such massive pitfalls. So I actually said to them, I had to explain to the estate agent and the solicitor what Article 4 was and why. And they went, oh, don't you want to buy it then? I said, no, I'm buying it deliberately in Article 4 because this house has grandfather rights. So all I need is a certificate of lawful development and I can legit refurb it and run it. So to me, it's a good opportunity, but not a clue. And I think that's difficult for newbies. So I'm kind of not really giving the answer other than a lot of due diligence and don't rush into stuff and don't overestimate that the gas bill will be massive because they'll leave the heating on all the time, no matter how much you try and do it. And EPC ratings, the new government are going to make things even more difficult for landlords and those costs and things, I think, they're huge. And if you haven't got access to money, I do have issue with all of this stuff, which is, you don't need any money to get started. Because if you're paying, like I don't pay anything over and above bank rates for my borrowing. It's like whatever. I just refinancing. Well, that envelope I just showed you just now after the solicitors, 5.34% at the moment. It's not brilliant and it's not poor. But if you're paying 10, 12, 15% to private investors, and you don't have any backup money when these things inevitably go over budget and what have you, which they do, then I know people have lost their personal house because they've put personal guarantees into things, having been on training courses where they said, yeah, just give them a PG. Well, do you actually understand? I'm an ex-bank manager, and I've done lives and so on about what are the risks? What does security mean? What does legal security actually mean? What does personal guarantee actually mean? And so there's a whole load of stuff. I don't say that to scare anybody off. Everything is doable, but I just think that sometimes the difficult sides of things, and those really important things are underplayed in favour of very sexy looking before and after photographs.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant answer. I think there's a lot to unpick there for people, but I think there's really good context. The due diligence side, the realities of investing. It's not just what, they make it sound really easy on social media, but it's definitely not. You and I know that very well. So for people that want to, I suppose, hear more about what you've got to say, I think Facebook's probably your best, because you're talking about Facebook groups and sort of having discussions in there. How can people sort of find Caroline if they want to follow
Spotify?
The journey?
Okay. I've done quite a few things on Spotify, and some of them, somebody asked me what was my best tip for managing HMOs, and we were having it was like a bit of a jokey conversation on that one, and I said bin management. Some of this stuff is the most unsexy stuff, and people, you'll know yourself, and Wendy certainly will as well. If you get one person in the house who is an idiot, I basically have a no idiots policy. But if you have one person in the house who is upsetting the other people, not pulling their weight, coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning, smoking weed, and that's even whether they're paying the rent or not, then that disrupts the whole balance of the house. And what I really try to do is have a genuine co-living thing where if you and I are going to live together in the same house, you don't think, neither of us think, oh, I don't want to go in the kitchen in case that idiot's there because they make me feel really uncomfortable. I just can't be doing with them, or they're going to leave the dishes all over the place and it's going to wind me up. Things like that. We need to, I need to be able to walk into a house, if you and I are living in there together, and go, oh, Scott, how are you doing? How's your day? I'm just making a brew. Do you want one? And it's that thing, so I try to make sure that the environment of the people are as compatible as I can, and it's basically like housemate Tinder but without the shagging, hopefully. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That try and put people together who are going to connect, and then that is the secret sauce. So over and above the initial getting on the ladder, that maintenance afterwards is absolutely critical, and it will make the difference between your business being successful or having a constant string of headaches.
Sure. So if people do want to, so you said Spotify, have you got a podcast then?
No, I go on people's podcasts, although I had to wind that down a bit lately because I've just been so busy. But I'm delighted that people seem to want me on podcasts. I'm on quite a few. I did used to do a lot of Facebook lives and stuff, which are on my page, which were literally, I'm going around houses, I'm doing this. So a lot of them on my personal Facebook page, which isn't necessarily public actually, but I'm literally going, like I probably should do one today when I go around and go, look, the ensuite doors are designed to go this way because I can get an ensuite into this room if you open the door that way, and that means you don't have to make it as big, and that makes a difference between this ensuite being able to fit into this room. That kind of property development information that I have, because I've learned it over the years, is really, really critical. I try and show as much as I can on lives if anybody can be bothered to listen, because they're quite long. I'm talking about drains, I'm talking about gutters, I'm talking about the really critical stuff that is important. It's not very sexy, but those things, if you get them right, they will give you the best foundation in order to have a thriving house and a thriving, profitable business.
Super. So the best place to find you then, Facebook, if not Instagram?
Facebook, I'm not very good on Instagram. A bit old-fashioned. Facebook, I've done loads of Facebook lives again about that stuff. So if anybody really wants to listen, they will get lots of valuable information if they can be bothered to look at me standing in the rain, pointing out why this house doesn't need a £5,000 damp course, because in fact all it needs is the gutters fixing, which might cost you £200. So there's loads of valuable information on there, on Spotify, on various podcasts as well.
Super, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming on today, Caroline.
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking me.
No, pleasure. So thanks very much to listeners today. Obviously, if you're listening on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. It helps the podcast. And if you're listening to the audio version, please do leave a review. Obviously, we can get more great guests like Caroline today. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.